Today we'll be talking about colonization. Let's begin with economic motivations, which were paramount in driving European colonization. In the 15th and 16th centuries, European nations were desperately seeking new trade routes and resources. The discovery of America by Christopher Columbus in 1492 opened up unprecedented opportunities. Spain had already struck gold and silver in Central and South America, and other nations, including England and France, were eager to find their own sources of wealth. The New World was rumored to be rich in gold, silver, and other precious materials. The initial hope was to find a northwest passage to Asia, which would facilitate direct trade with Asia's lucrative markets. While that route was elusive, the prospect of exploiting the New World's untapped resources became a compelling alternative. For example, the fur trade became a significant economic driver, especially for the French. They established trading posts and forged alliances with Native American tribes, exchanging European goods for furs, which were highly valued back in Europe. Another critical economic factor was the doctrine of mercantilism. This economic theory dominated European thinking at that time and was based on the belief that a nation's power was directly tied to its wealth, particularly its stockpile of gold and silver. According to mercantilism, a country should strive to export more than it imports to accumulate wealth. Colonies were seen as essential to this strategy. They could supply raw materials to the mother country, which would then manufacture goods and sell them back to the colonies or other markets. This cycle was intended to benefit the mother country by ensuring a favorable balance of trade. For instance, English colonies in America provided tobacco, cotton, and other raw materials to England, which then processed these materials and sold finished goods. Mercantilism also sparked the development of the triangular trade system, involving Europe, Africa, and the Americas. European goods were traded for African slaves who were then sold in the Americas, where their labor produced raw materials sent back to Europe. This system not only boosted European economies, but also laid the groundwork for the Atlantic slave trade's devastating human impact. We'll talk about that later. Now let's shift to the role of national rivalries in driving colonization. During this period, England and France were part of a broader competition among European powers for global dominance. The success of Spain and Portugal in establishing overseas empires put pressure on England and France to follow their path. Colonies were not just economic assets, they were also seen as a way to enhance national prestige and power. Establishing colonies allowed England and France to project their power overseas and stake their claims to the New World. Each new colony represented a potential advantage over rival nations. For example, England's establishment of the Virginia colony in 1607 was partly a response to Spanish successes in the Caribbean and South America. Colonies also provided strategic military and naval advantages. They served as bases for naval operations, offering safe harbors and resupply points that were crucial for maintaining and extending a nation's naval power. This was particularly important in the context of ongoing conflicts between European powers, such as Anglo-Spanish War and later conflicts between England and France. For instance, the English established the colony of Jamestown not only as an economic venture, but also to serve as a foothold in the New World from which they could launch further exploration and potentially counter Spanish influence. Furthermore, control over colonies allowed nations to dominate important maritime routes and secure critical checkposts, which was essential for protecting their commercial interests and disrupting those of their rivals. Religion also played a crucial role in the colonization efforts of England and France. Both nations saw colonization as an opportunity to spread Christianity and convert indigenous peoples. This missionary zeal was particularly strong among the French, who were predominantly Catholic. French Jesuit missionaries were active in North America, working to convert Native American tribes to Catholicism. These missions often went hand in hand with the establishment of trading posts and settlements. For England, spreading Protestant Christianity was also a motive, particularly as a counter to Spanish and French Catholic influence. The English saw their colonial ventures as a way to promote their own religious beliefs and undermine the Catholic powers of Europe. Under Henry VIII, the English Reformation began with the dissolution of monasteries and redistribution of their wealth. However, the theological and doctrinal aspects of the Reformation evolved significantly under the subsequent rulers, particularly Edward VI and Mary and Elizabeth I. Edward VI introduced more Protestant reforms, while Mary attempted to restore Catholicism. Elizabeth I's reign marked a return to a moderate Protestantism, establishing a religious settlement that sought to balance various factions within the Church. Puritans were a group of English Protestants who sought to purify the Church of England of what they considered to be a remnants of Catholic practices and to reform its structure and worship. They were motivated by a desire to create a more devout and morally rigorous Christian community. Puritans faced persecution under the reign of Elizabeth and James I, as their calls for further reforms were often met with resistance from the established Church of England. The Puritans' insistence on removing all remnants of Catholicism from church practices and their desire for more radical reforms led to conflicts with both religious and political authorities. The persecution and political climate in England drove many Puritans to seek refuge in the New World. Between 1620 and 1640, a significant wave of Puritans migrated to America, known as the Great Migration. They aimed to establish a society based on their religious ideals and to escape what they saw as the corrupt influences of the English church and government. The Pilgrims were a specific group of separatists who, unlike the Puritans, chose to separate entirely from the Church of England. They were driven by a desire to worship freely and establish a new community where they could practice their faith without interference. The Pilgrims, also known as the Separatists, believed that the Church of England was beyond reform and that true Christians should separate from it entirely. They sought to create a distinct independent community based on their interpretation of the Bible. The Pilgrims initially fled to Netherlands to escape religious persecution in England. However, they were concerned about the cultural and religious impact on their children and sought a new place to establish their own community. In 1620, they sailed to North America aboard the Mayflower, landing in Plymouth. Their settlement became known as the Plymouth Colony. Seeking a place where they could worship freely and create communities based on their religious principle, these groups established colonies in America. The Pilgrims, for example, founded Plymouth Colony in 1620, as I mentioned, while the Puritans established the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630. These colonies were envisioned as cities upon a hill, models of religious virtue and piety that would inspire others. In summary, the colonization of America by England and France was driven by a complex interplay of economic motivations, national rivalries, and religious factors. The quest for new trade routes, valuable resources, and adherence to mercantilist policies created powerful economic incentives. Simultaneously, the desire to outmaneuver rival nations and secure strategic advantages on the global stage fueled the race to establish colonies. Lastly, religious motivations, including the desire to spread Christianity and seek religious freedom, significantly influenced colonization efforts. As we continue to explore the history of early American colonization, keep these factors in mind. They not only explain why England and France ventured into the New World, but also how their actions set the stage for future conflicts and developments in American society. Now we embark on a journey through time to explore two of the earliest and most pivotal attempts by the English to establish a foothold in North America, the mysterious Roanoke colony and the pioneering Jamestown settlement. These ventures were marked by ambition, exploration, economic aspiration, and religious motivation, with narratives filled with both triumph and tragedy. Through these stories, we'll understand how these early efforts laid the groundwork for future colonization and shaped the history of what would become the United States. The saga of Roanoke begins in the vibrant court of Queen Elizabeth I, where the spirit of adventure and competition with Spain was palpable. England, eager to match the wealth and power Spain had garnered from its new world conquest, turned to bold explorers and courtiers to spearhead its colonial ambitions. Sir Walter Raleigh was an important figure in Elizabethan court, a soldier, explorer, poet, and favorite of Queen Elizabeth I. Born into a well-connected family in 1552, Raleigh's early life was marked by his education at Oxford and his service in army in France. His charisma and intellect quickly earned him the favor of the Queen, and he became one of her trusted confidants. Raleigh's ambition was boundless. He envisioned establishing an English empire in the Americas that would rival Spain's dominions. In 1584, he received a charter from Queen Elizabeth to explore and colonize lands in North America. Raleigh never set foot in the New World himself, but his name became synonymous with the early English attempts to settle there. Raleigh's first attempt to establish a colony was driven by both economic motives and the desire to expand Protestantism. He dispatched an expedition in 1584 led by Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow to scout the coast of what is now North Carolina. Their reports of the fertile land and friendly natives fueled Raleigh's plans for a larger expedition. In 1585, Raleigh organized a group of about 108 men, including soldiers, craftsmen, and scientists under the command of his cousin, Sir Richard Grenville. They aimed to establish a permanent settlement on Roanoke Island, a strategic location offering protection from Spanish attacks and a promising environment for agriculture. However, the settlers soon faced significant challenges. The island's marshy terrain, coupled with the sweltering heat and mosquito infestation, made life difficult. Relations with the local Native American tribes, initially friendly, became strained as the settlers' demands for food increased. The local tribes, particularly Secotan and Croatan peoples, were initially curious and somewhat welcoming of English settlers. However, cultural misunderstanding and resource competition quickly soured relations. The English, unfamiliar with the complexities of local political dynamics and agricultural practices, often acted with a sense of superiority and enlightenment, leading to conflicts and mistrust. By 1586, the situation had become dire. The settlers were struggling with food shortages and increasing hostility from Native Americans. When Sir Francis Drake, returning from a successful raid against the Spanish in the Caribbean, arrived at Roanoke, he offered to take the settlers back to England. Underrated by the initial failure, Raleigh launched a second, more ambitious attempt in 1587. This time, the colony was to include families, with the hope that a stable community would take root. John White, an artist and experienced explorer, was appointed governor of the new venture. This expedition was markedly different from the first. It included 117 men, women, and children, indicating a commitment to creating a permanent settlement. Among them was Eleanor, John White's daughter, who would give birth to Virginia, the first English child born in America. Upon their arrival, the settlers found the remnants of the previous settlement and decided to rebuild on Roanoke Island. However, they faced the same challenges: limited supplies, a harsh environment, and deteriorating relations with the local tribes. Recognizing the dire need for more resources, John White returned to England to gather additional supplies. His departure was intended to be temporary, but the outbreak of Anglo-Spanish War delayed his return for 3 years. When White finally returned in 1590, he found the colony deserted. The only clue to the settlers' fate was the word Croatoan, carved into a post and CRO, crow, on a nearby tree. This mystery has persisted for centuries, fueling speculation and investigation. Several theories have emerged to explain this disappearance of the Roanoke colonists. Some believe the colonists sought refuge with the Croatan people on the nearby island, integrating into the local population. Archaeological findings and oral histories suggest this possibility. Others posit that the settlers perished from starvation, disease, or conflicts with the Native American tribes. Another theory suggests that the colonists might have been captured or killed by Spanish forces, who were also active in that region. Despite its failure, the Roanoke colony holds significant historical importance as the first English attempt to establish a permanent settlement in North America. Its legacy includes several key lessons and implications for subsequent colonial endeavors. The failure of Roanoke colony underscored the critical importance of thorough preparation, adequate supplies, and strategic planning in establishing successful colonies. It highlighted the challenges of adapting European settlement practices to unfamiliar environments and the necessity of understanding and respecting indigenous cultures. The experiences of Roanoke directly influenced subsequent English ventures, including the successful establishment of Jamestown in 1607. The lessons learned from Roanoke's hardships and ultimate disappearance informed later colonial policies, strategies, and interactions with Native American tribes. The disappearance of the Roanoke settlers has captured the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and the public alike. It remains a subject of ongoing research, exploration, and speculation, with effort to uncover archaeological evidence and historical records that may shed light on the fate of the colonists. The mystery of Roanoke has inspired numerous works of literature, art, and popular culture, contributing to its enduring legacy as a symbol of exploration, adventure, and the challenges of the early colonial ventures. Now let's move on to Jamestown colony. In contrast to the ill-fated Roanoke colony, Jamestown stands as the first successful and enduring English settlement in North America. Established in 1607 along the banks of the James River in Virginia, Jamestown was founded by the Virginia Company of London, a joint stock company chartered by King James I with the goal of establishing profitable colonies in the New World. The Virginia Company's charter granted it the authority to establish settlements, exploit natural resources, and engage in trade with the expectation of generating profits for its investors. The company aimed to find valuable commodities such as gold and silver, establish trade networks with indigenous people, and create agricultural enterprises that would support the colony's growth and sustainability. The expedition that founded Jamestown was the culmination of years of planning, preparation, and investment by the Virginia Company. Led by Captain Christopher Newport, 3 ships, the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery, departed England in December 1606 with 104 settlers on board. Their journey across the Atlantic Ocean was fraught with challenges, including storms, disease, and the logistical difficulties of maintaining supplies and morale during the lengthy voyage. Upon their arrival in the Chesapeake Bay area in April 1607, the settler chose a peninsula along the James River as the site for their new colony. The location offered several advantages. It was easily defensible against potential Spanish attacks, provided access to navigable waterways for trade and transportation, and was surrounded by fertile land suitable for agriculture. Despite the promising location, Jamestown faced immediate challenges that threatened its survival and stability. The Jamestown Peninsula, though rich in natural resources, presented significant challenges for the colonists. The area was characterized by marshy terrain, humid climate, and waterborne diseases such as malaria and dysentery, which took a heavy toll on settlers' health and well-being. The initial group of settlers, many of whom were gentlemen unaccustomed to manual labor, struggled to grow sufficient food. Their lack of agricultural experience, combined with the difficulties of farming in the unfamiliar environment, led to chronic food shortages and malnutrition. Captain John Smith emerged as a key figure in the survival of Jamestown. His leadership, characterized by a pragmatic approach and a willingness to work alongside the settlers, helped stabilize the colony. Smith implemented a policy of "he who does not work shall not eat," which enforced discipline and motivated settlers to contribute to the colony's well-being. His strict but effective leadership helped improve productivity and maintain order during the colony's early difficult years. Smith's diplomatic skills were crucial in establishing a working relationship with the Powhatan Confederacy. His accounts, though sometimes embellished, tell of his interactions with Chief Powhatan and his daughter Pocahontas. Smith claimed that Pocahontas saved his life during a dramatic encounter, a story that has become a central part of the colony's mythology. Smith's effort to negotiate and trade with Powhatans allowed for periods of relative peace and mutual benefit, although the relationship remained fraught with tension and occasional violence. The interactions between the English settlers and the Powhatan Confederacy were characterized by both cooperation and conflict, influenced by misunderstanding, competition over resources, and differing cultural values. The winter of 1609 and 1610, known as the Starving Time, was one of the most traumatic periods in Jamestown's history. The colony faced severe food shortages due to a combination of factors, including a failed supply mission, deteriorating relations with the Powhatan, and the inadequate food storage. During this period, the population of Jamestown dwindled from approximately 500 to just 60 survivors. Archaeological evidence has revealed the extreme measures the settlers took to survive, including cannibalism. The severity of the situation underscores the challenges faced by early colonists in adapting to their new environment and the importance of planning and resource management. The colony's fate took a dramatic turn for better in the spring of 1610 when Lord Delaware arrived with a new supply of food, additional settlers, and a renewed commitment to the colony. His leadership and the influx of resources helped stabilize Jamestown and set the stage for recovery and growth. Now we will briefly talk about the evolution of governance and social structures. The governance of Jamestown evolved over time as the colony faced new challenges and opportunities. The Virginia Company initially managed the colony under a corporate charter, but changes in leadership and oversight led to shifts in governance. In 1619, the Virginia Company established the House of Burgesses, the first representative legislative assembly in American colonies. This body allowed settlers to have a voice in local governance and set a precedent for self-government that influenced future American political development. By 1624, the Virginia Company faced financial difficulties and criticism for its management of the colony. In response, King James I revoked the company's charter, making Virginia a royal colony under direct control of the crown. This transition marked a new phase in the colony's development, with increased oversight and support from the English government. The legacy of Jamestown extends beyond its early years of struggle and survival. As the first permanent English settlement in North America, Jamestown laid the groundwork for the growth and expansion of English America. The establishment of House of Burgesses set a precedent for self-governance and democratic principles that would become foundational to American political development. The cultivation of tobacco established a model for plantation agriculture that influenced the economy and social structure of the southern colonies for centuries. The complex interactions between English settlers and the Powhatan Confederacy reflect broader themes of conflict, negotiation, and cultural exchange in colonial history. Now we will discuss the relationship between the colonists and the Native Americans. The settlers encountered the Powhatan Confederacy, a powerful alliance of Algonquin-speaking tribes led by Chief Powhatan. Relations were initially cautious, with both sides engaging in trade. However, misunderstandings and competition for resources soon led to conflicts. Let's elaborate on this point a bit further. As the colony expanded, relations with the Powhatan Confederacy became increasingly strained. The encroachment of English settlers on Native American lands and resources led to conflicts and wars. The First Anglo-Powhatan War and the Second Anglo-Powhatan Wars were marked by violent confrontations and shifting alliances. The growing tensions culminated in a series of conflicts known as the Anglo-Powhatan Wars. The first major conflict erupted in 1609 and lasted until 1614. The war saw brutal tactics on both sides, including burning of Powhatan villages and crops by the English. The war ended with the marriage of Pocahontas and John Rolfe, symbolizing a temporary peace. The peace was shattered in 1622 when Chief Powhatan's brother led a surprise attack on the Jamestown colony, killing around 347 settlers. This attack, known as the Indian Massacre of 1622, marked the beginning of the Second Anglo-Powhatan War. The English retaliated with devastating force, decimating Powhatan villages and further entrenching hostility. The final conflict occurred from 1644 to 1646, again led by the brother of Chief Powhatan. Despite initial success, the Powhatans were eventually defeated. His brother was captured and killed, leading to the collapse of Powhatan power and the establishment of English dominance in the region. What is interesting here is the marriage between Pocahontas and John Rolfe. The marriage of Pocahontas to John Rolfe in 1614 was a notable event in the colony's history. The union, seen as a symbol of peace and cooperation, helped temporarily ease tensions between the English and the Powhatan. Pocahontas' visit to England in 1616 further symbolized the potential for harmonious relations between the two cultures. However, her death in 1617 and subsequent conflicts with the Powhatan undermined the fragile peace. One of the most significant developments in Jamestown was the introduction of tobacco as a cash crop. This economic innovation transformed the colony and laid the foundation for future prosperity. In 1610, John Rolfe, a settler who had arrived during the starving time, began cultivating a strain of tobacco that was well suited to European tastes. Tobacco quickly became a highly profitable commodity, driving economic growth in the colony. The cultivation of tobacco required extensive labor, leading to the development of a plantation economy and the introduction of indentured servitude and eventually African slavery. The success of tobacco cultivation led to expansion of plantations along the James River and other parts of Virginia. Large tracts of land were cleared and planted with tobacco, creating a labor-intensive agricultural system that shaped the colony's social and economic structure. We will now talk about indentured servitude. It was a critical labor system that shaped the early development of Jamestown and other English colonies in North America. This system played a pivotal role in the economy and social structure of the colonies, providing much needed labor for agricultural and infrastructural development. Today, we will explore the origins, conditions, and evolution of indentured servitude along with its long-term implication for American society. The early settlers of Jamestown faced significant labor shortages. The initial focus on finding gold and other quick riches led to a neglect of essential agricultural activities. Once it became clear that survival depended on cultivating the land, the need for a reliable labor force became urgent. In the early 17th century, England faced high unemployment and poverty rates, especially after the enclosure movement displaced many rural workers. This created a pool of potential laborers who were willing to take the risk of crossing the Atlantic in search for better opportunities. To address the labor shortage, the Virginia Company and other colonial promoters developed the system of indentured servitude. This system allowed individuals to work for a set number of years in exchange for passage to the New World, food, shelter, and eventually land or money. This arrangement benefited both the labor-starved colonies and the impoverished workers seeking new opportunities. Indentured servitude was based on formal contracts that outlined the terms of service. Contracts typically lasted between 4 to 7 years depending on the arrangement or agreement. They stipulated the rights and responsibilities of both the servant and the master. Servants agreed to work diligently and obey their masters, while masters promised to provide basic necessities and, upon completion of the terms, freedom dues, which often included land, tools, or money. Recruitment was often handled by agents known as spirits, who persuaded or even coerced people into signing indenture contracts. The transportation across the Atlantic was perilous, with many servants suffering from disease, malnutrition, and overcrowded conditions during the journey. Life for indentured servants in Jamestown colony was harsh and demanding. Servants performed a variety of tasks depending on their master's needs. This included clearing land, planting and harvesting crops, especially tobacco, building infrastructure, and tending to livestock. The work was physically demanding, often under harsh weather conditions with long hours and minimal rest. Living conditions for indentured servants were generally poor. They lived in basic, often overcrowded quarters with limited access to adequate food and medical care. The high mortality rate among servants was due to the combination of strenuous labor, poor living conditions, and disease. Masters had significant control over their servants and could impose strict discipline. Punishments for disobedience or attempting to escape included whipping, extended terms of service, and even imprisonment. The legal system generally favored masters, providing limited resource for servants to address grievances. Servants had few rights. They were often prohibited from marrying without their master's permission and had little autonomy over their daily lives. Despite the harsh conditions, the promise of eventual freedom and land kept many hopefuls. For those who survived their terms of service, the transition to freedom was both a moment of triumph and challenge. Upon completing their indenture, servants received freedom dues. This could include land, money, clothes, or tools to help them start their new life. The prospect of owning land was a significant motivator for many servants, offering the chance for economic independence. Life after servitude was not always easy. Freed servants often faced difficulties in acquiring and cultivating land, integrating into colonial society, and competing with wealthier, established planters. Nonetheless, some former servants managed to become successful farmers and even community leaders. Now we will delve into Bacon's Rebellion of 1676, a pivotal event in colonial American history that exposed deep-rooted tensions and brought significant change to Virginia's social, economic, and political landscape. This rebellion was not just a simple uprising, but a complex convergence of economic hardship, social stratification, and political disenfranchisement. Understanding Bacon's Rebellion gives us a clearer view of the evolving dynamics in colonial America and the shift from indentured servitude to African slavery. In 1670s, Virginia was experiencing significant growth and transformation. The colony's economy was booming due to the lucrative tobacco trade, but this prosperity was unevenly distributed, leading to widespread discontent among poorer colonists. Wealth was concentrated among a small elite of large plantation owners. These wealthy planters controlled vast tracts of land and dominated the colony's political and social institutions. In contrast, many former indentured servants found themselves landless and impoverished after completing their terms of service. They struggled to acquire land and economic independence, facing competition from wealthy planters and indigenous peoples. The political structure of Virginia further exacerbated these economic inequalities. The House of Burgesses, the colony's legislative body, was controlled by the planter elite, leaving the poorer settlers with little political power. Governor William Berkeley's administration was seen as corrupt and unresponsive to the needs of the common people, further fueling discontent. Governor Berkeley's policies towards indigenous peoples were seen as overly conciliatory by many settlers. He preferred building forts for defense and negotiating treaties which he believed would stabilize the frontier. However, these measures were perceived as insufficient and ineffective by the settlers who were directly affected by the ongoing conflicts. The expansion of English settlements into indigenous territories led to frequent conflicts. As settlers moved westward, they encroached on the lands of indigenous tribes, leading to skirmishes and attacks. The colonial government, seeking to maintain peace and trade relations, was often hesitant to support aggressive expansionist policies, causing frustration among frontier settlers who demanded protection and more land. Nathaniel Bacon was a recent arrival in Virginia, having come from a wealthy English family. He quickly acquired land and established himself as a prominent figure in the colony. Despite his elite background, Bacon positioned him as a champion of common settlers' grievances. Bacon's charisma and oratory skills helped him gather support from disaffected colonists. He portrayed himself as a leader willing to take decisive action against the perceived threats from indigenous tribes and the colonial government's corruption. While Bacon genuinely resonated with the settlers' frustrations, his rebellion also had personal motivations. His conflict with Berkeley had elements of a power struggle as Bacon sought greater influence and control within the colony. The immediate catalyst for the rebellion was a violent incident involving the Doig tribe. In 1675, a dispute between frontier settlers and the Doig tribe led to the killing of several settlers. In retaliation, a militia formed by settlers launched an attack not only on the Doig but also on another peaceful Indian tribe, escalating the conflict. Governor Berkeley's response to this incident was seen as weak and ineffective. He preferred negotiation and restraint, while the settlers demanded a more aggressive military response. This perceived inaction angered many colonists, setting the stage for rebellion. In 1676, Bacon took decisive action against the colonial government. Bacon rallied a group of armed settlers, including both former indentured servants and small farmers. His promise to address their grievances and provide protection against indigenous attacks won him widespread support. Bacon and his followers marched on Jamestown, demanding the governor authorize a militia to fight the indigenous tribes. When Berkeley refused, Bacon declared him a traitor and took control of Jamestown by force. Imagine the tension and chaos as armed settlers stormed the colonial capital, challenging the established authority. In July 1676, Bacon issued the Declaration of the People, accusing Berkeley of corruption and failing to protect the settlers. This document outlined the settlers' grievances and justified their rebellion against the colonial government. Imagine the rebellious fervor and the hope for change among Bacon's supporters. With control over Jamestown, Bacon enacted several reforms aimed at reducing the power of the planter elite and addressing the settlers' demands. This included measures to reduce taxes, promote westward expansion, and establish a more equitable government. While these reforms were short-lived, they reflected the colonists' desire for greater representation and fairness. Governor Berkeley, however, was not ready to relinquish control. Berkeley fled Jamestown, but soon organized a loyalist militia to retake the capital. After several skirmishes, Berkeley's forces managed to regain control of Jamestown, forcing Bacon and his followers to retreat. In October 1676, Nathaniel Bacon suddenly died of dysentery, a common and often fatal illness in the colonies. His death marked the collapse of the rebellion, as his followers lacked the leadership and coordination to continue the fight. In the rebellion's aftermath, Governor Berkeley sought to reassert control and punish the rebels. Berkeley's forces captured and executed several of Bacon's key supporters. He also confiscated property from those involved in the rebellion, using these actions to restore order and deter future uprisings. Imagine the atmosphere of fear and retribution as Berkeley's crackdown unfolded. Berkeley's harsh measures were criticized both in Virginia and in England. The Crown eventually recalled him to England, partly due to concerns over his handling of the rebellion and the colony's stability. One of the most significant long-term impacts of Bacon's rebellion was the shift in the labor system from indentured servitude to African slavery. The rebellion highlighted the dangers of relying on a labor force that could become discontented and rebellious after gaining their freedom. Planters began to see African slaves who were enslaved for life and whose children were born into slavery as more stable and comfortable and controllable labor force. Following the rebellion, Virginia and other colonies began to pass laws that institutionalized racial slavery. These laws created a clear racial divide, making it easier for planters to justify the permanent enslavement of Africans. Think about the profound shift in colonial society as these legal changes took root, laying the foundation for centuries of racial inequality. The rebellion exposed the weaknesses and corruption in colonial administrations. In response, the English Crown increased its oversight and control over the colonies, seeking to prevent future uprisings and ensure more effective governance. The rebellion underscored the need for better representation and more responsive governance. While significant changes were slow to materialize, the settlers' demands for greater political power and favour policies continued to resonate, influencing future colonial and revolutionary movements. Bacon's rebellion was a complex and transformative event in colonial American history. It revealed deep-seated economic, social, and political tensions within Virginia and had lasting repercussions for the colony and beyond. The rebellion's legacy includes the shift towards African slavery, changes in colonial governance, and the ongoing struggle for representation and fairness in American society. As we reflect on this history, it's essential to recognize the multifaceted nature of Bacon's rebellion and its profound impact on the development of the American colonies. This event offers valuable lessons about the challenges of governance, the consequences of social inequality, and the ways in which ordinary people can drive significant change.